Welcome in. And before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you tonight. I always love seeing where in the world everyone is listening from. Now tonight, we're diving into one of those strange little questions that most people never think about until it suddenly pops into their head at 2 a.m. How exactly did people wake up before alarm clocks? Because before smartphones buzzed on nightstands, before digital alarms screamed people awake for work, and before someone invented the deeply unpleasant sound of beep, beep, beep at full volume, human beings still had places to be. Farmers had crops waiting, merchants had shops to open, soldiers had battles to arrive at, preferably on time, and kings, presumably, had very important king-related business. Therefore, waking up on time has always mattered. But if clocks did not exist in every bedroom, how did people actually manage it? Well, strangely enough, for much of history, the answer began with an animal that has absolutely no respect for anyone trying to sleep in. The rooster. Tonight, we're going to explore how ancient and medieval people woke themselves long before modern alarms existed, from nature itself to noisy farm animals, to giant church bells, to clever inventions, and eventually even people whose entire profession was essentially bothering strangers awake before sunrise. And honestly, by the end of this video, your phone alarm may start to seem a little less annoying. To understand how people woke up before alarms, we first need to understand something important. Most people in the past did not think about time the way we do. Today, nearly everyone organizes life around exact numbers. We wake at 6:30, leave at 7:15, panic at 7:16, and arrive 5 minutes late anyway. But ancient people did not live like that. For most of human history, there were no precise schedules, no watches, and certainly no one saying things like, "Sorry, I'm late. Traffic was terrible." Instead, life moved according to the sun. Morning began when light filled the sky. Work began when visibility was good enough to actually see what you were doing. And evening arrived when darkness made doing literally anything difficult. Therefore, many people simply developed natural sleeping rhythms around daylight. Without television, electricity, or the terrible decision to watch just one more episode until 3 a.m., people often went to bed not long after sunset. And because they slept earlier, they naturally woke earlier too. In many ways, their bodies functioned more closely to how humans were originally designed. But of course, natural sleep alone was not always enough. Because while some people could wake peacefully with the sunrise, others, much like today, could probably sleep through the end of civilization itself. For thousands of years, nature itself served as humanity's earliest wake-up system. Sunlight was perhaps the most important factor. As dawn approached, light slowly entered homes, tents, cottages, and huts, gently signaling to the brain that morning had arrived. And because ancient homes lacked blackout curtains, soundproof windows, or suspiciously expensive memory foam eye masks, there was really no escaping it. If the sun was up, you were probably up too. But sunlight was only part of the equation. Morning also came with its own soundtrack. Birds chirped in trees, livestock stirred in barns, neighbors began moving around, villages slowly came alive. Therefore, ancient mornings were rarely silent. Even without a clock, people could sense the world waking around them. But among all those morning noises, one sound became more associated with waking up than any other, and that was the rooster. The rooster's morning call. For centuries, the rooster may have been the most famous natural alarm clock on Earth. Its loud morning crow became one of the clearest signs that night was over and the day had begun. And while modern people often think of roosters as charming little farm animals in children's books, let's be honest, a real rooster is less charming and more feathered chaos goblin screaming outside your window at sunrise. Still, they were useful, very useful, because roosters naturally crow based on internal rhythms and changing light patterns, often before the sun fully rises. Therefore, farmers and villagers came to rely heavily on them. Imagine living in medieval Europe. You own no clock. You have no phone. You have no glowing smartwatch tracking your sleep quality and quietly judging your life choices. But every morning, your rooster erupts into dramatic screaming, and suddenly, the entire village knows the day has started. It was simple, it was loud, and most importantly, it was free. Well, assuming you already had the rooster, but of course, roosters were not exactly precision instruments. Sometimes they crowed too early, sometimes they crowed repeatedly, sometimes they seemed to crow for no reason whatsoever, apparently because chaos is funny to them. Therefore, while useful, they were hardly perfect. And as towns grew larger, people needed something slightly more reliable than angry bird noise. As villages expanded into towns and cities, communities required a more organized system. And so, bells became one of history's most effective public wake-up tools. Large bells placed in churches, towers, or public buildings could be heard across entire neighborhoods. Therefore, instead of relying on a single rooster somewhere nearby, entire populations could wake to one powerful sound. Catholic churches in particular played a major role in this system. Morning bells often called communities to prayer, but they also acted as unofficial wake-up signals for daily life. And if you have ever stood near a giant church bell while it rings, you already know missing that sound would have been nearly impossible. It was less of a gentle wake-up and more of a medieval good morning, whether you like it or not. Therefore, for many townspeople, bells became the closest thing they had to a public alarm clock. But what happened if someone needed to wake up at a very specific time? Perhaps before sunrise or in the middle of the night? Well, humans being humans, they invented solutions. One surprisingly clever method was the candle clock. People would mark candles at measured intervals. As the candle slowly burned down, it indicated the passing of time. But some went even further. Metal nails were inserted into the wax. Therefore, once enough wax melted, the nail would drop onto a metal tray below with a loud clang. Which means ancient humans essentially created the world's first alarm noise. Except instead of electronic beeping, it was random metal crashing beside your bed in the dark. Equally impressive were water clocks. These devices measured time using controlled water flow, allowing people to estimate passing hours even during nighttime. Ancient civilizations, including Egypt, Greece, and China, used them regularly. So, despite what we sometimes imagine, people in the past were not simply guessing all the time. They were creative, resourceful, and apparently very determined not to oversleep. And then we arrive at perhaps the strangest solution of all, because in 18th and 19th century Britain, being woken up became so important that some people literally paid another human to do it. These workers were known as knocker-uppers. Yes, that was the real name. And yes, it sounds made up. Their job was simple: wake clients before dawn. They would walk through streets carrying long sticks or poles, then tap on customers' bedroom windows until they woke up. Some used rattles, others used small hammers, and some reportedly fired dried peas through blowpipes at upper windows, which means for a brief moment in history, grown adults paid someone to stand outside and aggressively launch vegetables at their house before sunrise. And somehow, this was considered a respectable profession. But it worked. Therefore, for factory workers during the Industrial Revolution, knocker-uppers became essential. Because when being late to work meant losing wages or employment, missing your wake-up time simply was not an option. Eventually, technology transformed daily life. Mechanical clocks became more affordable. Personal alarm clocks entered ordinary homes. Electricity changed sleeping habits, and society shifted toward stricter schedules and precise hours. Therefore, humanity slowly stopped living by nature's rhythm. People no longer woke with sunrise because they wanted to. They woke because a machine informed them, rather aggressively, that they had responsibilities. And so, the rooster, the bells, the candles, the window-tapping strangers, all slowly faded into history, replaced by the modern alarm clock, a device specifically engineered to ruin everyone's morning equally. So in the end, how did people wake up before alarm clocks? Well, they relied on sunlight, animals, community bells, ingenious inventions, and occasionally another person whose entire purpose was to annoy them awake. And strangely enough, for thousands of years, that system worked remarkably well. In fact, ancient people might find modern alarms rather ridiculous. Imagine trying to explain to someone from the Middle Ages that every morning, millions of people willingly place a tiny, screaming machine beside their head before sleeping. They would probably think we had all gone completely insane. Thank you for being here tonight. And if you enjoyed this little journey into history, rest well, sleep peacefully, and I'll see you in the next story. Good night.